Welcome to Down Earth Astrology and Prime Girl Wellness. This is Miss Jenny, and I am your astrologer. And today I'm also your palm reader. So we are going to look at some examples of the palms of politicians to see what their hands can tell us beyond a handshake. So here we have the palms of three different politicians, because I want you guys to get a good comparison of how hands can be very different one person from another, and how striking the difference in the amount of information we can get looking at palms in this way. Now, I'm not going to reveal who these politicians are yet. One of them you should know, if you watched a previous video, is Rishi Sunak, the newly appointed Prime Minister for the United Kingdom. The other two are our mystery profiles. Okay, so first things first. When you're looking at a hand, one of the things that you're going to look at is the hand in its normal or natural position. So if you tell somebody to show me your hand or show me your palm, they're typically going to stick their hand out in one of two extreme ways, either like in your face with their finger splayed wide open as if they couldn't get their palm open any wider, or the exact opposite, where they put their hand at you, but their fingers are so tight together water couldn't get through their fingers. So what you really want is just a natural drop of the hand in a very relaxed, normal manner for them. So these particular photographs were chosen, one, because these were politicians who were putting their hand up at the camera, so they weren't thinking about the position of their hand, they were just responding with their hand. The other is that these are as clear images of their palms and hands as I could get in natural positions. And even with just this, we can tell an awful lot by looking at the hand. So the first thing when you're looking at someone's hand, we're looking at the spacing between the fingers, right? So the spacing between the fingers is going to tell us a lot about how a person is generous or stingy with their money. So here we can see that the fingers are fairly reasonably spread out, it's including the thumb, right? So we would expect some moderate generosity, nothing too extreme, not too stingy and cheap, not too overly generous and impractical. So this is a good normal distance we would like to see in a hand. This, you see how close these fingers are together? This is an indication of somebody who is not free and generous with their money. As a matter of fact, this is somebody who's usually a pretty stingy or tight. But interestingly, if you look, right, this thumb is wide away from these fingers. So that tells us something too. This distance right here, get it? Oh, it's not going to give it to me. This distance right here is an indication that while a person may not be by nature very generous, they're still capable of being very generous or giving with their resources if they feel it suits a purpose. And then, of course, here, right, we have the fingers wide open. Look at the distance here between the pinky and the ring finger, right? And even here, and then here. This is somebody who is not, this is not someone I would put in charge of financial management. This is somebody who can't hang on to money. Money literally slips through their fingers because they're overly free with it. The other thing that you can tell just by looking at the hand in a very superficial, immediate sense is the general shape and size of the hand, right? So here we have a square palm. Get a highlighter here. This is what's considered a very square palm, as is this. And this is a little bit more rectangular. Actually, this is more spatulate. So this tells us a couple of things as well, right? So with this, with a square-shaped hand, what we have typically is somebody who is very physically bound. They literally do best with what is right in front of them. These are not necessarily very imaginative people that are more and most comfortable with the physical world. So abstract ideas, social graces, the arts, high-minded, airy-fairy kind of intellectual things are not, these are not things that appeal to them. Because they don't know if they can't kill it, to eat it or build with it or wear it, they don't really know what to do with it. So square palm people are very practical, earthy people. Here we have what is kind of like a spatulate hand, right? So it's almost like a spatula. And with spatulate palms like this, what you typically get are people who are much more experience oriented. So this is somebody who, on the one hand, is again very earthy, right? Very what's in front of them is what matters. They don't really have a lot of use for intellectual airy fairy, stuff like that. Like it's what they can put their hands on is what they're most comfortable with. But with that spatulate formation, and it's a spatula because this is so much wider than this. This is also somebody who tends to be a little bit more adventurous than this one, more of a risk taker, more of an adventurer, more likely to at least consider something just to say that they've had the experience. So spatulate hands are really good for people if you want to go out and break new ground or do things above and beyond like the regular routine. With rectangular palms, you'll typically see this in people who are more intellectual than they are physical. Um, Long palms like this, right? Some are more narrow than others, but ultimately what you have is a palm that's longer than it is wide. With real long rectangular palms like this, you have people who are much more comfortable with academic exercises, with intellectual exercises. They're more interested in the principles and ideologies and arts and culture and things of more ethereal, less vulgar physical things. So typically you get people who are thinkers, practical thinkers. So they like to think, plan, and do. Whereas characters like this um, tend to do. They don't. They think in the short term and then do. So there's not a lot of planning that goes on with these guys. And these guys are planners and doers. There's not a lot of abstract thinking and cogitating going on here. Okay, so there's that. The next thing, just by looking at the hands alone, so we've covered the distance in the fingers, right? We've covered the palm shapes. Now, what else can we tell by looking at these hands? Well, the other thing we can tell is looking at these thumbs. So the thumb has everything to do with your will and your strength and your desire to dominate in your relationships or dominate other people or be highly accommodating, right? So the power in your hand or in your person or the desire for power, expression of power, things that have to do with power show up in the thumb. So I liked these three. These are great examples because they're very, very different from each other, right? So here in this one, we've got a really long thumb, and then we've got this long phalange that goes down into this little tip, right? So this is somebody who doesn't pursue power just to pursue power. Again, with this long, flat tip, you have somebody who's much more mental and intellectually inclined. This is much more about ideas and principles. With this long thumb, before we get to the tip, what this also shows us is somebody who is much more likely to think at length before they actually move on an idea or a thought. So these are the kinds of people, you want in charge of anything where miscalculation has serious penalties and consequences, because you want someone who is long on thought before they take action. And even then when they take action, see that sloping thumb, it's not about power or domination. It's very much about what's necessary at the moment or what seems like the best idea academically. Now, I will say, if you look at this thumb, right, compared to the rest of the hand, that thumb is significantly pronounced. Oh, here we go again. So the thumb is in this hand, the thumb is very, very prominent, and that means that this person, power and the access, use, and acquisition of power is extremely important for them. This is not somebody who's going to be a pushover by any stretch of the imagination. Because of the slope and taper of the thumb and the length of that body of the thumb, this is not somebody who's a bully. This is not somebody who's going to run around, acquiring power just to lord it over other people or, to make everything about having power. But this, because of that prominent thumb on this hand, this is also somebody who is not going to be easily pushed over, in spite of the fact that they come off as, cool, like more mental than physical. Now, if you look here, right, I thought this is an interesting thumb as well. So this is a fairly long thumb, and again, it's a matter of, because these are not long fingers, this is not a long palm. This whole thing right here is just kind of short, right? Short and meaty. This is not the hand of a very imaginative or mentally sophisticated person. However, this thumb is very long compared to the rest of the hand, and it's very prominent. So again, this is somebody who, in spite of their intellectual shortcomings, is not somebody who's going to be easily pushed around, and also is most likely to pursue power, to have power. And once they have it, they're not likely to let it go. Now, one of the other things you're going to notice is the straight thumb. This represents a very inflexible personality. Slightly rigid, not very movable or flexible in any direction necessarily. There's a slight taper at the end, but it's not significant. Certainly not like this, right? And it's almost shapeless. So there's just nothing dynamic here. Even though this person is not someone who can be pushed around necessarily, this is also not somebody who's very dynamic with the power that they do have. So they're a bit like I hate to say it, but they're a bit like a brick. They're kind of there, and good luck moving them out of the way. And there's more here. We're going to come back to that. Now, this one was interesting as well. Look at this. Freaking looks like it's got some kind of weird deformity going on. Every now and then you'll see people with these weird thumbs. Now, this is what's called a clubbed thumb. Because if you look, right, the waist of this thumb, where the body is, like in these two instances, the body of the thumb is nice and long. This is what we want. We want somebody who thinks before they act. But here, it's a short body, and very specifically, it's a wasted thumb. It's almost like somebody wrapped something around that thumb and pulled it tight, right? Because look at how narrow that is. And this, of course, leads to this club at the end. Clubbed thumbs are not anything you want to get involved with. So depending on the other things that are showing up in a hand, because it's not just this alone, it's multiple factors. A clubbed thumb is typically indicative, if other factors are present, typically indicative of somebody who's capable of violence and or brute force application of power, like a bully but worse, right? So sometimes they call it a murderer's thumb, because these are people who are all about power just to have power. It's not good. But again, remember, this depends on other factors in the chart. Don't run around seeing this and assuming that the person's a murderer. But I will say that when it comes to a god-awful temper and people who are very, very dangerous, because they will hurt you. They will hurt you just because they can. That's the important part of that sentence. They will hurt you just because they can. These are the people that you see a lot of with a clubbed thumb. Now, the other thing is, because the angle is photographed, we can see it. The thumb bends. Are you noticing that? See that curve in the thumb, right? So if you'll notice, these two do not have that hyper curve in the thumb. right? And what this tells us, when you see this hyper curve, what this tells us is that this is somebody who's very easily swayed by other people, right? Which is interesting considering this is also somebody who's capable of hurting people just because they can hurt them. This like sadistic sort of brutishness. But that extremely curved thumb shows up in two different ways. One, it shows somebody who's very sensitive to how other people are responding to them. So they will do everything they can or bend over backwards to accommodate the opinions of other people. They're very sensitive to that. The other is, again, and this goes with the whole clubbed thumb thing, right? This curve implies that they spend a lot of time pressing down or holding people under their thumb. So, the shape of the thumb and the length of the thumb, all these things make a difference in terms of what we're looking at and how to read that. In this particular case, one of the things you're going to notice also is this is a short thumb. This is not a very long thumb. Look at this, right? It's not very long compared to these guys, right? This is a little short, nasty, brutish, clubbed thumb. This is a sadist. This is a sadist who will hurt you just because he can. And it's very much about keeping people under his thumb, right? And worse, he's sensitive to other people's opinions. So he will do bend over backwards, literally, to accommodate other people's opinions of him. So I guess it just depends on which side of him you're on, the good side or the bad side. So right here, just looking at these three hands, literally just superficially, we're already getting a good sense of the personality that we're dealing with and the differences between them. Now, this is the palm for Rishi Sunak. I think I've got his name right. He is the newly elected Prime Minister for Great Britain, and this is the best picture of his palm I could get. So one of the things that we also look at is the proportion of fingers to palms, right? The length of the fingers to the palms. One of the things you're going to notice, because remember, he's got that long rectangular palm, right? He has very long fingers. Now, he's a skinny strip of bacon. This one is. But his fingers are relatively even. Notice that all the fingertips are together. Maybe this one. No. Oh, I see him on the highlighter. All of his fingertips are relatively the same length, right? And that they're about equal length with the palm. Actually, I think the palm is a little bit longer than the fingertips, actually. So what this would tell us is that this is somebody who's much more pragmatic in their thinking and not necessarily so long on imagination. And again, there's that prominent thumb on the hand because that thumb takes up almost literally it's almost a whole hand by itself. Now in palmistry, each section of the hand has a planetary rulership and or some type of significance in terms of what rules it to give us information about what we're looking at. The forefinger is considered your Jupiter finger. The middle finger is your Saturn finger. The ring finger is your Apollo finger or the Sun finger. The pinky is the Mercury finger. The heart line is the first major line on your palm. The head line is the next line underneath it that goes across the palm. Connected to that is your lifeline, which is a bit of a misnomer or a little confusing because actually the lifeline is specifically referring to your physical vitality and health. The mound right here is considered the mound of the moon. The mound here is considered the mound of Venus. On your thumb, it is split up into two parts. So the long body of the thumb is considered the part of reason, or where reason is indicated, and the thumb tip is your will. So looking at Mr. Sunak's palm, we know a couple of things. We know that his thoughts and actions are fairly balanced, right? He gives good thought and certainly lots of thought and planning before he acts on things. And there's a good amount of intellect to support this pragmatic kind of think before you do sort of behavior, which is good. You don't want long rectangle and short fingers, because what this means is this is somebody who spends a lot of time thinking and planning and not having a great vision because they can't see the forest for the trees sort of stuff. If we go over here, one of the things, one of the first things we look at, right, is we look at anything unusual about the fingers. So everything seems fine. The Saturn finger is a little twisted, which gives it a little bit more prominence, as well as the Mercury finger. So these two things right here, this Mercury finger, which rules the mind and thinking, and the Saturn finger, which rules our respect for authority and rules and our obedience, would indicate that one, he's very much somebody who is very serious about the rules, but also he's a little bit of an independent thinker. Not a lot, but just enough, which is good, because if this were really twisted and deformed or really overly prominent, this would indicate somebody whose thoughts are disconnected from, well, reality. I mean, they're such an independent thinker, nobody knows what the hell they're thinking. So we're okay with it being a little bit prominent, not too prominent. And that Saturn finger, definitely, he's a rule, what is it, play by the rules kind of guy. With all of these fingers basically being very close in length, with Mercury, the pinky finger being so long, it's almost as long as the other ones. What this indicates is that there's a balance there's no imbalance of uh, emphasis on ambition or forward motion or anything like that. However, that Mercury being so long, it's almost the same length as these, does indicate that this is somebody who is an intellectual. This is not a physical person, this is an intellectual person. So their thoughts, the thinking process, their intellect, it dominates everything about who they are. Now, their heart line is here, and you'll see that the heart line runs around and comes like curves up just under the Saturn line. This is somebody who takes their relationships and their emotional commitments very seriously. This is not somebody who's prone to giving its heart away in a fit of romance. So when you see this in a palm, when it's ending under the Saturn finger, we know that this is somebody who we can count on to be reliable and to uphold their commitments. Even if they're a little boring to live with, we know that they'll be there and they've got our back. The headline is here, and this represents a couple of things. It represents our intellect. So one of the things we can see slightly, it's a little difficult in here, is some fraying or feathering along the lines. That shows a lot of anxiety or nervousness in the mental processes. One of the other things that you'll see is that headline and the lifeline are connected all the way out into like the 20s, maybe even the early 30s, before it finally splits. Right here shows us the early family environment. So it's possible that Mr. Sunak, I don't know, I'll have to go check, but it's possible Mr. Sunak was intimately tangled with his family well into his 30s before he finally broke free and had a separate life from them, or a more independent separate life from them. Now, this is the mound of Venus, this section right here on the thumb. It's not really prominent, but it's also not flattened and almost disappearing, which is good. So it gives us a reasonable sensual nature, meaning that he has the ability to have reasonable and modest pleasures in the things that make us enjoy life. Good food, comfortable clothes, comfortable places to sleep, all the creature comforts come through here. So he has a good, healthy appetite for it that is not excessive. With all this hyper intellectual and saturnine things in his hand, we want this here because otherwise he would be as dry as a stick and no fun to be around. Oh my lord. Now, what's interesting about him, this is the mound of the moon. His mound of the moon is very prominent. The mound of the moon has a lot to do with imagination and vision and more abstract type of thinking. It's very well developed in his hand. So while he's not given to excess pleasures of the flesh and creature comforts, he is, however, given to tremendous amounts of imagination and deep thought, which combined with his prominent Mercury, remember that twisting of this finger, means that this is somebody who, in his own right, has a lot of activity going when it comes to thoughts and plans and dreams and visions of how to do anything, which is very, very nice as well. Now, also, one of the things you're going to see right here, because down here is the mound of Neptune, is a fate line that runs right up his palm and ends between the Sun and Saturn. So when you have a fate line that runs up through the hand like this, there are events in your life that will take hold that absolutely you won't have a choice no matter. You have to have these experiences, and you may be called upon to act or do something in some way that is for the benefit of things well beyond you specifically. And we can't really see too much else in his palm with his picture, so we're going to end this here. This does give us, again, a better look at his thumb. So again, look at how prominent that thumb is compared to the hand. And this section is the part of reason, or represents our ability to reason, in a long, prominent section of the thumb that is involved with reasoning. Again, this is a thinker. This is a thinker and a planner. And this, of course, is the will. So with that tapered thumb here, really flat and kind of tapered, he's not a forceful personality. It's not his nature to push through situations. He is much more accommodating, see that curve, right? And much more intellectual. Whenever you see a flat tip like that, I mean, these are almost bloodless creatures like cold fish. You'd almost think they didn't have any feelings at all. But these are people whose will is subjugated to reason, intellect, and visions. And so there you go. So this is the same picture, but blown up a little bit more so we can try and get like a little bit of a better picture of these lines. And again, this is the heart line going up to that Saturn, right? This is the lifeline. See that right there? Okay, now the lifeline is good and strong and clear, and it goes all the way down. There aren't any breaks or separations. So his physical health and vitality should be good, strong, and long, and he should live a good, long life without any health issues or any significant ones. Again, this is the mound of Venus right here. We can see it, but it's not overly prominent. So he enjoys creature comforts, but he's not driven by them. The moon, the mound of the moon, is very, very prominent. So in many, many ways, there's a visionary quality to his thinking. And again, here's the lifeline. See how the lifeline comes together? It's right here when it finally splits, right? So this is the family life. So it would have been, I'm guessing, his early 30s when things finally broke and he was able to get on with his life on his own. The separation between the heart line and the headline also indicates a very good ability to keep his emotional nature and his intellectual thoughts separate. So he can keep his mind and heart separate from each other. So his emotions won't cloud his thinking, and his thinking doesn't cloud his emotions. Which is good. You want that in somebody who's making important decisions. God knows you don't want a hothead who can't separate their feelings from they can't separate their butthurt feelings from what needs to get done. So all in all, I would say that Sunak, just as far as the palmistry goes, he's off to a good start as far as being a candidate somebody can feel comfortable with, because there's a lot of good things showing up in his character, as we see in his palm, that makes him a lot more trust-inspiring and confidence-inspiring, because he's not a hothead. He's not, overly concerned with power and domination. Like he's a thinker and a planner and an intellectual. So there's something to be said for that. And also there's a strong visionary quality, and he's not driven by his creature comforts or desire for them. So these are all really good things in terms of somebody who's able to be moderate and far thinking in their ideas about how to solve problems. So I'm okay with that. All right, now here we have our two guest palms. And I'm not going to tell you who they are until later, but let's again look at the hands. So again, looking at the space or length of the fingers compared to the length of the palm. So one of the things we're going to notice here is that, again, the fingers, they're a little short compared to the palm. The palm is longer than the fingers. This is the one that was spatulate, right? Because the bottom of the palm is wider than the top. So this is somebody who's, very adventure driven, very action oriented. They're the person like, hey, let's jump off the boat in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, let's do it. They'll do it. The problem with this particular hand is that these fingers are not really long and they're kind of chubby. So this is somebody who doesn't lend themselves to deeper intellectual thought. And it's good for some things, bad for others. In terms of running a government and being a politician, this is not what I want to see, because this will lend itself to being grubbing, right? Money grubbing, creature comfort grubbing, all that sort of stuff. And combined with this prominent thumb, which is all about power and domination. This is, I personally don't want to see that. I would like to see much more intellect and a lot less um, adventure seeking, and certainly a lot less power seeking in this case. Although I suppose if somebody were going to be power seeking and adventure seeking, I wouldn't want them to be too smart either, because then they would be dangerous. So, this is just an ordinary Joe kind of hand. Now, what's interesting about this hand also, I don't know if you can see it, but if you look at this hand, this is somebody who's never worked a hard day in their life. This is not somebody I would want making decisions for me as a commoner or a working person, because this person would have zero clue what it means to have to work or sacrifice for a living with these little dumpling hands. Cough, cough, cough. Now, with his hands, one of the other things we're looking at, remember that mound of Venus over here? Well, look at how pronounced this is. This big, fleshy pad right here under the thumb. This is somebody who's absolutely all about their creature comforts. They love and they want and they are motivated by the things that make them feel good. Good food, good clothes, good places to park their big soft butts because they're not doing any work. All that sort of stuff. And then with that long thumb, they're very much about getting other people to do all the work while they are as comfortable as possible. Now, the mound of the moon is, actually you can see right here, like the mound of the moon actually kind of seems a little depressed, right? Look at this. It almost looks like it's sinking in. This is somebody who's not very imaginative. And that's kind of a problem. And if you look, right, this Mercury finger is not very long either. It's a short, stubby finger. So if Mercury is, and the Mercury finger represents our intellect, this is not somebody who's going to be considered one of our great deep thinkers in time. And I don't, like, if this is you, it's probably fine depending on what your work is. But I'm being a little snarky right now because these are politicians. And politicians are all about policy, and that's all about principles and ideas and ideals. And I'd rather see a freaking think tank like making these policies than Joe the plumber here, or not even Joe the plumber, little Lord Fauntleroy has never worked a day in his life and has all the intellectual vision of Joe the plumber making these policies. And that's pretty much what this hand is. Now, mind you, I don't know these people personally. I'm literally just looking at their palms, so take it for what it's worth. And remember, this is not you. Your palm is a whole culmination of things. In this context for them as politicians, these are not good things. So Mercury, and also notice that Mercury is separated from these fingers. Do you see that little space in here? Right? So this is somebody who, because the Mercury finger is not very prominent, but it is standing away from the other finger. So this is somebody who will nod their head and agree with you or whatever, not say anything at all, but will definitely do and think whatever they want separate from you. Like they've got their own thought process going on that has nothing to do with what anybody else is thinking. And look at how close these fingers are together, right? So there's also a bit of stinginess. They are really keep things close to their chest. They don't share information or goods or resources with other people very readily. They're very careful about what and who they give things to, whether it's information or stuff. Now, what is prominent in this hand, look at this. Look at this finger. Do you see how this finger is kind of twisty, right? So we've got this one long flat thumb where there's no flexibility. This person is not flexible. It's literally my way or the highway, and that's it. They can't see past what they want, right? And there's this, so they've got all sorts of ideas and thoughts of their own that have nothing to do with anybody else. So it doesn't matter what you tell them, they're going to think what they think. That's it. There's not a lot of ready cooperation or input intellectually coming from this person. And again, this is a short, stubby Mercury finger. This is not somebody who's intellectually gifted to begin with. So this combined with this twisty index finger, do you see that? Look at this. It is prominent because it's slightly twisted where the other ones aren't. This is your Jupiter finger, and your Jupiter finger has everything to do with ambition, right? So the Jupiter and the Sun finger, although the Sun has more to do with fame, this has to do with fame, this has to do with personal ambitions. So with this Jupiter finger prominent and all this that we're also seeing with that inflexibility, this excess motivation by physical comforts, right? And this thinking, independent thinking that has nothing to do with what other people are thinking. There's no input necessary. And then this overemphasized Jupiter finger, which is ambition, this doesn't create a great picture of a politician we want to see in office. Because literally this is somebody by rights, if this is what we're seeing and describes something that is accurate, this is somebody who literally is just there for what they can get, to hell with everybody else. Yeah, not what I want to see in a politician, not my politicians. Okay, so there's that. Now, in this hand over here on the right, one of the things I want you to see, this one, right, is look. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, let's try this again. So on this side, right, one of the things that I want you to see here, because this is kind of interesting, right, is look at the length. Well, two things. One, we're going to look at the length of the fingers compared to the palm. So this is what would be considered short fingers, right? We're always measuring against the palm. And, you know, we could say that it's a long palm, but it's not. Because remember, this is a square palm. It's a square shape in here. Get a better marker. Sorry, folks. Hang on. Bear with me. Right. So that's a square palm. That's not a long palm. If this were a rectangular palm, then it would be different. But this is a square palm. So to have a square palm and then to have fingers that are relatively short, right? Because they are the length of the palm or just slightly shorter than that. These are short fingers. The fingers represent your intellect. So when the fingers are short, this is not somebody who's given to deep thought and intellectual activity and all this sort of stuff. And again, in the context of a politician, this is a problem because they make policy. And for people who make policy, which are all abstract things built on ideals and principles, you want somebody who's academically and intellectually inclined. You don't want, you know, Pete the pipe fitter making policy for, you know, educational funding because it's not in his wheelhouse. That's not what he does best. So in this particular case, and this is the hand of a politician, this is somebody who had no business, if they're going to do anything good, you know, being a politician and helping to make policy. That's a problem. Now, what's also notable about this particular hand, look at this one finger, right? So all of these fingers are about the same length, right? Except this finger, which is like almost deformed. It's so long compared to the rest of them. Now, this is a Saturn finger. And the Saturn finger has everything to do with rules and obeying orders and doing what you're supposed to do or what you're told to do. The Saturn finger also has a lot to do, excuse me, with being enforcing the rules for other people, making other people do what you want them to do. Now remember, everything is a combination of things. So when we look at that, don't panic if that's you. That just means that you are a taskmaster if you've got a super long Saturn finger. In this particular case, though, with that super long Saturn finger and this mess over here, this is somebody who loves making rules for other people that they themselves are not necessarily going to follow. Now, they might follow orders or follow the rules or obey if they need to, but even in those cases, because, you know, see right here, right? Even in those cases, it's going to be to a limited select few people that they will allow to give them marching orders, and they will obey without question. This is somebody who would have made a great Nazi guard during World War II. Because if somebody had told them to go, you know, throw babies in the air and stab them with bayonets, they'd have done it, you know, but only if the orders came from very specific people. And if that happened, they would do it without question. Because again, also too, remember, these fingers are not, these are short fingers. This is not somebody who's given to deep intellectual thought. So them questioning orders would have required a deeper thought than they're necessarily naturally going to do. Again, not something I ever want to see in a politician making policy for me. Now, also too, look at this. Look at how far away that Mercury finger is from the rest of the hand, right? So we know over here, right? That Mercury is prominent. It's a little further away from everything else. There's a little bit of, yeah, whatever. I'm going to do it my way anyway kind of thing. I'm going to think what I want to think no matter what you tell me. We know that's happening here, right? But here, this is literally practically divorced from reality. Because when the Mercury finger is that far away from the rest of the hand, from the rest of the fingers, this is somebody who literally thinks whatever they want to think without any input from the world around them. They literally could give a rat's anything what other people think or how the world works or like what the Webster's dictionary of a word is. They literally are making it up as they go along on their own. It's an overly mercurial position. The other thing is, just so you guys know, and again, context, this does not necessarily apply to everybody. When the Mercury finger is that far away from the hand, this is typically somebody who's a compulsive liar. So if you're looking for somebody who's prone to and very good at telling tall tales and fibbing, look for that Mercury finger to be completely separate from the rest of the hand, because this is literally a runaway or out of control Mercury or mental function. Wagging tongues. All right, now let's take a look at what else we got. Okay, so this is the hand of Mr. Never done a hard day's work in their life, right? And I blew this picture up so we can get some really good images of the mounds, right? So again, there's that pronounced mound of Venus, right? Here's the lines. With this hand, right? So look at this, right? So there's the lifeline, but if you'll notice, there's a split here. Looks like that. So we've got other things going on. So we're going to start right here. So right here indicates there should have been a major break, and this should have happened a couple of times, right? There should have been a major break in the life, a major event where there was a traumatic separation. So it would have started in early life, and this would have continued well into, I'm guessing this is like the late teens. My ages are not really precise when I do this. So I'm guessing this is like the teen years, high school years, school years, secondary school, primary, like high school, right? Ninth grade. And then again here, this looks like it would have been their 30s, maybe their early 40s, but I'm thinking their 30s. So there should have been some major traumatic stuff happening right around here, looking at that. And also see this? Notice how they're completely separate from the lifeline. So life would have right about here, I'm at the early teens. I'm thinking it's the early teens, like the early part of life, not childhood, but certainly just a little past it. There would have been some major event that totally set life on a completely different trajectory, as well as the possibility of some kind of major childhood illness that should have occurred. Come back here. All right. Now, this is the lifeline, and this is the headline, right? And this is the heart line. Now, here's what's interesting about this, and this is what I don't like about this hand, especially for a politician who's responsible for large masses of people. The headline, look at this, the headline is not connected to anything. It's not connected. I mean, it's barely connected to the lifeline right there. So the thing about it is, and remember, they had that Mercury finger was just a little twisted, right? So this indicates to me that there's a distinct possibility that this person's thinking processes are completely divorced and separate from everything. Like, I don't even, ooh, golly day, I thought we had it bad over here. So they're very much an independent thinker, but sometimes they have to guard against the tendency to be a little too independent in their thinking and a little too divorced from the reality that we're all sharing, which isn't to say that they're crazy, but it is to say that sometimes perspective is a big problem for them. Also, too, when you look at the headline, notice that it starts, right? So because you see that break, like it literally starts under the Jupiter finger and ends under the Sun finger. And this would indicate tremendous ambition, and maybe more than a little hubris in terms of how they see themselves and what they're going to do in life. So everything in life from early on would have been very much about their personal ambitions, and being famous. So sounds a little bit like somebody we know whose name shall not be mentioned in this video. Okay, and here's the heart line. right? So the heart line comes up between Jupiter and Saturn, which is a normal placement. It is very faint out here. It gets deeper as we go through here, right? So this would indicate that in the early life, the emotions would have been very shallow. There may not have been a lot of emotional support. See that? There may not have been a lot of emotional support when they were growing up, which may have retarded their ability to make deep connections with other people, which could also explain why their thinking begins and ends with their ambitions and being famous, because they didn't have anything else to really connect with, or to validate them when they were very young, which is kind of sad. So there's that. And also, while we're looking at this, notice, use this one. You see that line under the sun line, and you've got these two lines under the Saturn line, and this heart line like goes up and double emphasizes that. So this again indicates that, one, they should become famous in this lifetime, if for no other reason than sheer will and determination to do that. But also, two, emotionally, they're cold fish, right? Because this is shallow at beginnings. There's no natural propensity for deep connection because it was missing in early life. It gets deeper as time goes on. So they mature into that, but it still ends up underneath that Saturn finger. So still, emotional connection has a lot to do with control and guardedness and rules and obligation, and less to do with all the warm, fuzzy, romantic things we like to think about when we think about connecting from the heart. So everything for them is a calculated move when it comes to relationships, which is sad. Which is very sad. Okay, so the other thing I want to point out is the fate line. They have a fate line. All three of these politicians have a fate line running their hand. Your fate line runs from down here, which is Neptune, and runs up into the hand, typically stopping right there at the headline. There are a couple of different possibilities of lines that may show up here. If you have a line here that makes it look like a double lifeline, that's another health line. If you have a line here, that's a moon line, right? But the line right here that comes up from this crease between them up through the middle of the hand like that, that is a fate line, and that's typically an indication that in this lifetime you will be called upon to be in situations where you are required to participate whether you want to or not, because it's part of your fate to be in this situation and to be a catalyst or a maker of great change. And so, whatever it is, you don't really get a choice in the matter. And for those of you who are wondering, this was the palm of Boris Johnson. Now, I don't know anything about Boris Johnson except that he looks like the lemon drop twin for our previous president, who shall go unnamed, and apparently was just as much of a wow. I swear we're in competition with England. These two could have been doppelgangers for each other on so many levels. And again, just a real quick thing, right? Look at the hand, right? Short fingers compared to the palm, right? This is not somebody who's given a deep intellectual thought, and that is not the kind of person you want making policies for anybody. Maybe not even the restaurant menu. I'm just saying. So this palm I thought was kind of interesting. So the first thing you're going to notice compared to the one we just looked at is this is not a healthy hand. Do you see all the mottling, the blotchy mottling through the hand? This is an indication of very poor health, and typically either high cholesterol or high blood pressure or both. But this is not a healthy person by any stretch of the imagination. Holy cow. So there's that. I couldn't get a better picture to see the lines in here. This is literally kind of the best I could do. But I can still see some of them, and I wanted to share with you some things that were really, really prominent here. So the first thing is when we look at the lifeline, which is here, one of the things you're going to notice is that it bifurcates, or what is the word? It splits in two. So the line comes down here, and then down here it splits. So this typically is indicative. I think it may even be, I can't tell. This might just be a shadow. I'm not sure. But typically when you see breaks in a lifeline like this, it indicates a health crisis. So at some point, there should have been some major health challenge or scare. And I'm guessing this is going to be early 50s. Maybe a little later. 50s and 60s, I think. I could be off. So again, my age timing is not perfect. I'm working on it. This is big, right? Whenever you see stuff like that, it's a big, big deal. The headline, which is here, also bifurcates or splits, right? So when the headline splits like that, because it splits right about here, and actually it does this. When the headline splits like that, it also indicates major life changes, right? So this would have been, I'm guessing right about here. This is gonna be like the early 20s. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a death in the family around that time. And this would have changed the trajectory and certainly the way they perceived things in a huge way. So there would have been a major life event right here, like in the 20s. Now, this is the heart line. Look at that. And the heart line like just makes this big giant loop-to-loop up between Jupiter and Saturn, but closer to Saturn. When you see heart lines like this, I mean, literally, look at this. It looks like a stitch in Frankenstein's head. This is typically indicative of somebody who has difficulty regulating their emotions, right? Because we'd like to see the heart line be a little bit more moderate, right? So big loop-de-loop lines like this is somebody who is given to emotional outbursts and has difficulty regulating or moderating their emotions. So there's that. And also with this giant bifurcating in the headline, that's a little challenging, right? So the headline, coming back to this real quick, one of the tails of the headline ends here in the mount of the moon, which also suggests that this person is highly imaginative and or prone to very fitfully imaginative things. One of the things you're going to see here is a line of Luna, right, which also is indicative, look at two of them, is indicative of a very fertile imagination. So, and remember, with this one, we've got this giant loop-de-loop deformed Mercury finger that's completely separated from the rest of the hand. So normally we would say that this was a psychic line, right? This is somebody who's very, very sensitive and in tune because they've got a very pronounced moon, mound of the moon. They've got the lunar line. However, this combined with this and combined with this indicate somebody who, when they go off on these fanciful, imaginative flights or departures from reason, really go out there. This is not good. This is not good. So I would really question what reality this person is perceiving when they're really going on a tear about something, because they're given to extreme departures from rational thinking like we know it. So it's great for writers and artists, not great, not great for policymakers. Oh my Lord. So there's that. Now the other thing with this headline, because it bifurcates, right? Look at this. So one of the bifurcations comes up into that giant looping roller coaster heart line. So again, this is somebody who may be more impulse driven, because heart and head are connected, but with that heart being so impulsive, the heart line, your emotions being so impulsive and hard to regulate, this heart and head connection is not necessarily a good thing. So there's that, and then you've got this little middle thread here that's just kind of there. We're already way into this. I'm not going to get too much more into this. So let me just back that out. Sorry. Now, with this, what you're also going to see is that they have, I would say this is an underdeveloped mount of Venus, or maybe it's an overdeveloped one. It's hard to say. It's hard to judge because this thing is so dominating everything. Although this is very pronounced. So I would say this is definitely somebody who's got some sensual appetites, likes things that feel good, all that sort of stuff. But that's not really the driving force here. The driving force is this need, desire, and pleasure in power and sadistic domination and control of other people, having people literally under their thumb. This is a murderer's thumb. Except this person is so, well, I mean, it's that I wouldn't put it past him. It's a dangerous thumb. This is a dangerous thumb. Okay, so anyway, there's that. And now this person also, interestingly, has a fate line. One of the things that all three of these politicians have in common is that they all carry a fate line in their hands. So it may not be enough in life to want to be um, a senator or the president or an astronaut or a world leading activist like Gandhi or um, I mean, it may not be enough to want these things. Sometimes we have to recognize that fate plays an important part in our role and contribution in the world. Whether we are prepared or suited or ill-suited for those jobs or not. So there you go. There's that. And this, my friend, was the hand of our United States 45th president and disgrace, Donald Trump. So again, same thing. Look at the hand. The hand is a box shape, and look at how short those fingers are. What's remarkable about his hand, though, is this Saturn finger that is so prominent. Look at how much longer than the other fingers it is, right? Look at this. And this thumb, this prominent, dominant thumb. So this is somebody, especially with a Saturn finger like this, who's very much about control. And remember, they've got that giant loop-de-loop in their heart line, so they have a very difficult time regulating their own emotions, and they're given to flights of fancy and all that sort of stuff, and great imagination and thoughts that have nothing to do with what other people are thinking. So this domination and desire for control would probably apply to other people. That may be literally the only thing in life that gives them pleasure, other than the basic physical creature comforts. So that's pretty terrifying. We may have dodged a bullet with that one. But so there you go. That's what's in a hand. And actually, surprisingly, the fingers are fairly long, all things considered. I mean, he's got a short palm, but the fingers still are fairly long and appear much more prominent and longer than expected. So he may actually be, I hate to say it, but he may actually be smarter than I give him credit for. So, especially with that long pinky finger. So I hate to even say that, but sometimes I can be wrong. He may actually be smarter than I gave him credit for. All right. And this has been Ms. Jenny with Down to Earth Astrology and Primal Girl Wellness. If you enjoyed this video and you have stopped looking at your hands, make sure you hit the like button to give me some feedback. If you'd like to see more videos about palmistry, definitely let me know in the comments section. And if you know anyone who might be entertained by watching this video, by all means, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe to get new notifications of upcoming videos. All right, I hope you guys are doing well, and we'll get through this. We're gonna get through this. So hang in there, baby, hang in there. So here I am giving you the virtual high five and waving at you, and we'll talk to you soon.